Welcome to the library for the Smithsonian, presented by the 300th Committee, the library, and a whole slew of other people. Welcome, welcome. So today is our Farmer Forum, led by John LeBeau, Commissioner of Agriculture, and a variety of other farmers who have come here to share some of their knowledge about this community and farming. So, I would like the farmers to introduce themselves and their farm when they speak, but I have introduced John. Let's get this show on the road. Thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John LeBeau. As I mentioned, since 2015, I've had the privilege to be the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. And even though I've been doing that for 8 years, today is the very first time I get to say I'm delighted to be here on behalf of Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. I just want to really quickly tell you a little bit about myself. I am a third-generation farmer. My family primarily farmed in Shrewsbury on what was known as Buttonwood Farm. If you know where the Haynes Farm apartments are on Route 9, that's where the homestead was. It was a traditional produce farm, dairy farm. Cows are long gone, well before the time I was born. My dad, after World War II, went to Stockbridge, studied horticulture, and either was smart or got lucky, but he saw the post-war building boom coming, and we operated Shrewsbury Nurseries on Route 9 for almost 60 years. I'll speak right into it. Okay. And I did particularly want to mention, I'm especially happy to be here in Rutland today because I inherited from a deceased family member a framed business card that says LeBeau Brothers, dealers in, it's either butter and eggs or milk and eggs, and it says Worcester, Mass., Rutland, Mass. So Mary Jordan, who my colleague and friend at the Department of Agricultural Resources, was able to speak to a gentleman whose name I forget, who's a former assessor in town, and he was able to discover for me that my family in the 19-teens owned the Sunset Farm on Glenwood Road. So we farmed here in Rutland as well. But Rutland is a town that has not just a great tradition and history of farming, it's still a very active, ongoing farming community, and trying to farm in the 21st century has its own unique challenges. Just to give you, I think, 3 facts about Massachusetts agriculture to just kind of give you some sense of where we stand. There's approximately 7,200 farms in the state. They do approximately $475 million a year in annual business, and our farms are doing their work on approximately 500,000 acres of working landscape in Massachusetts. Truthfully, all those numbers have dropped dramatically since, well, maybe not the dollars, but the acreage and number of farms has dropped dramatically since World War II. I mentioned earlier the post-war building boom, and that building boom was farmland being converted to residential property and shopping centers and things like that. So with that, I think it would probably be good for our farmers to say hello to you all, and as you can tell, farmers, we've been encouraged to get that microphone right in front of us when we speak. So why don't, well, I think the easiest thing is to start on my left, and we'll move down. Well, say hello, tell them. You know these folks.
Of course, it's Dick Williams, been in town all my life so far, and that's Overlooked Farm is where I started, and what's the old man for that? And the 5th generation is now on the farm, so that is so super.
And farming what, primarily, right now?
Ask Mr. Jordan, corn and grass I rented out to him, and my nephew has the bulk of it for the sap castle for making maple syrup.
Terrific.
And it was originally Pepper Project, but you people all knew that originally anyway.
Okay?
Okay, pass it on, please.
Randy Jordan, 5th generation dairy farmer here in Rutland. Most of all of my life. We recently moved from the town of Holden, but we've been in Central Mass for 150 years or so farming. We milk cows at the farm and raise a few turkeys at Thanksgiving and doing hay and corn to feed our animals.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Heidi Cooper. I'm a little bit of, I think, the black sheep sitting up here today. I am here on behalf of Lilac Hedge Farm, which is owned by Ryan McKay. So I am not a landowner up here, but representing that farm. Within that, I have a little bit of a unique situation as well. I am also personally a 5th generation farmer, but from the Midwest, and my parents were the skipped generation in that. So I was fortunate to marry a dairy farmer, get back into agriculture, and then when we left his family business to join Ryan at Lilac Hedge Farm, I was able to submerge myself back into that. So I'm very grateful to be here today, address anything and ask any questions anyone has, and have a great talk. In addition to that, I represent Worcester County Farm Bureau as our county president right now. So Worcester County in general, the farms that are here, I'm a main contact and advocate, as we call them, for the folks that farm in our county.
Hi, I'm Lauren Williams. I'm a 1st generation farmer, although I am the mother of the 5th generation that Dick mentioned. So I'm here mostly to talk about Overlook Farm, which is actually an acronym for Food Awareness Resource of Massachusetts. We're a nonprofit educational farm on space that we lease from Lilac Hedge, and we're expanding into some growing space leased from the Williams family as well. But we grow food for donating, mostly to the Council on Aging in town, and we run programming for people of all ages about food, farming, eating, and being outside on farms. And I'm part of South Castle.
Hi, I'm John Williams, 4th generation on what was Overlook Farm, my grandparents' dairy farm. In the late 80s, most of that property was donated to Heifer Project International, and then when they closed in 2017, we were fortunate enough to buy back 230 acres of what is APR property, and that is where the majority of our sugar bushes. We tap about 600 trees at the moment. We're looking at probably double that in the next few years, and we've already started tapping. So that's very strange.
Yes.
But we're already making syrup for the season, and hopefully it continues on, and we can make it a good season. But we shall see. So thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Gary Limatanen. I'm a 3rd generation farmer. The farm's own a 80-acre farm on Kenwood Court, the end of Kenwood Court. The farm's been in the family for 106 years, proud to say. We raise meat birds, laying chickens, turkeys, pigs, and goats. We used to be a dairy farm and beef farm, but we've kind of graduated from that as I'm getting a little older. But I'm proud to say that we've been in continuous agriculture for the full 106 years, and I believe it's one of the oldest family farms in town.
I hope you can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
My name is Kathy Peterson. I live in Holden. I don't have any connection with agriculture. I'm a lifelong resident of Holden, and I'm a 58-year Grange member. They asked to have a representative of the Grange here. Rutland does not have a Grange, and so I'm here representing Holden Grange and probably the Massachusetts State Grange, and I'll discuss a little bit about that as time goes on.
Here's our future.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Jordan of Jordan Dairy Farms. I'm proud to say that me, my brother, and cousins are 6th generation there. I'm a student at Kansas State University. I'm a junior in agricultural education. So while I moved out to the Midwest for college, I'm really excited to come back to the East to continue my future in agriculture. I'm really fortunate to have grown up in it and contribute a lot of my personal life skills to that. And so I'm excited to make that my career path.
Hi, I'm Susan Mann. I grew up on Alta Vista Farm over on Hillside Road, and my grandparents bought the farm in the early 1950s, and my parents lived there for many years. I'm going to let my sister tell the rest of this.
Hi, I'm Sally Mann. So my grandparents bought the farm in 1951. They moved their dairy farm, which was on Greenwood Street in Worcester and Millbury, to Rutland at that time. And they had the dairy farm until probably the mid-1960s, sold off the dairy. And then my father went out on a hunting trip out west, brought 2 6-month-old bison calves home. And from there on, the bison kind of grew. We got rid of having the beef animals. We've had turkeys, we've had chickens, we've had layabirds. And right now, Kevin Javi, who lived next door to us, he bought the farmhouse. My mother still owns the APR land. Susan and I are up in New Hampshire, but we certainly miss the farm lifestyle.
Hi, my name is Bill Mason, and I was not expecting to talk here today. I came up to listen, but I get dragged. So I'll just fill you in on why I'm here. I'm a first-generation farmer here in Rutland. My wife and I bought 11 acres 25, 26 years ago, and we cleared the land and we grow Christmas trees, and we also make maple syrup.
Thank you, Bill. As the conversation just started, you heard a couple references, you heard the initials APR. I want to make sure maybe everyone does know what that means, but it's not annualized percentage rate in this case. It's agricultural preservation restriction. So that's a program I'm very proud to say, though I had nothing to do with it, but Massachusetts was the first state land preservation, agricultural land preservation program in the nation. One of my predecessors, Commissioner Fred Winthrop, created it, proposed it, and got it legislated in the late 70s. And this is a program by which the land is not sold. The farmer remains the owner of the deed of the property, but the state buys the non-agricultural development rights from that farmer. So from then on, the farmer may farm the land, but the farmer may not, say, sell that land for a residential housing project or something else. And some of the folks here might also, it's about protecting the soil. It's not so much necessarily to be an economic development device for the farmers, and sometimes that's difficult because farmers might want to do an activity to go to their bottom line. It may not be quote-unquote agricultural. We have to make decisions about that, and we do the best we can. We do have processes to allow certain non-agricultural uses. And just to give you some sense of the scale, there's about 73,000 acres of protected APR land in the Commonwealth, and we're just a little shy of 1,000 different farms that are protected. So I mentioned 7,200 farms in the state, and just about 1,000 of them have APR on them. Now there are other means of protecting property as well. So I think a question as we go around the room, and maybe we can use this microphone as well, could you talk a little bit about, well, first of all, those who haven't said, do you have any land that's protected, whether through APR or through some other means? It could be a conservation restriction. There are different ways to accomplish that. And so there's an influx of cash. I mean, when the state buys those rights, there's often some significant money that changes hands. But that's a one-time event, and then the land is protected in perpetuity. So as you move years past that moment when the transaction happens, you've got descendants who might want to do different things with the farm. You might have a potential new owner who bought a farm that was an APR and might have different ideas. So I hope we could start at this end of the room. Could you talk a little bit about if it's been valuable for your farm to be protected, or why your family may or may not have chosen to do it, and has it worked?
Sure. So my father's 1996. We have 130 acres that was put into the APR program,
And I think my father did it because there's just a love for the land and not wanting to see that land put into housing lots, cut up, used for something else. Has always felt that it was a very special property and it should probably remain in an agricultural status. So for us, we've hayed the land, we use it for the grazing of the animals. The state of Massachusetts has what they call a option to purchase. And when it is sold, it has to be sold in agricultural value. And I think there's been some changes. So yes, APR has worked for us. I think it has certainly accomplished what my parents wanted to see have happen to the farm, and certainly my sister and myself. I think one of the things with APR, it's been a little frustrating sometimes transferring ownership because of the option to purchase, and the state had the ability to, if they didn't approve of the farmer, they could take the property back. But there's been a lot of changes, like in the last 2 years, I have to say, with some of the rules and regulations around that, which I think have worked out great. I'm just trying to think if there's any other, is there anything else that you can add to it?
No, but I mean, I think I really appreciate some of the regulations that they had, and I think that many of them were put in place to make sure that who did buy the APR land really did keep it as agricultural land and not try to do some other kind of business. The restrictions can be challenging when you have a buyer that you'd like to sell it to, but I do believe that the intent from the organization was to really, really make sure that that land remains agricultural. So I think that's, who's next?
I would just move it.
Sure, so I think for us, it was kind of a surprise, not only for us, but for everyone in the community when Heifer closed. And I think that property went into APR in the early 90s, 93. So for us, having that ability to buy that amount of property back at an agricultural rate was huge. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. And that, I think that allowed us to, continue on making syrup on the property. Before Heifer had closed, we had tried to get a lease with them and get those trees kind of secured so that we could use them to make syrup. And it was that same year that they closed, so we found that out, and then we were able to purchase the property on our own. So I think that was a big advantage to it being an APR, and obviously now the tax rates being what they are better, and that helps us as well. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in addition to APR, the 61A program, which adjusts your tax rate to be agricultural. So the APR gives you money up front, but we were not farming in 1993. We were young. So, we didn't necessarily see that money. We got the value of being able to buy it at agricultural rates. But with the 61A program, we have also the value of paying agricultural rate taxes on that. I mean, it's property that it'll always be agricultural. We can never sell it to a developer. So being able to sort of pay on what that real value is really helpful. And I mean, I don't want to speak for Bill, but I think his intention in putting it into the APR program was perpetual agriculture, to have it be protected. I don't know if he imagined that 30 years later his grandkids would be buying it back, but it allowed it to become a family farm again, because like John said, we would not have been able to pay sort of market rates for 200 plus acres of land. We just wouldn't. So it made a huge difference for us.
I'd like to say, I think it's an incredible program. Speaking on behalf of Ryan, as a not technically first generation farmer, but someone who has purchased both of his farm properties. So we have the near 50 acres in Rutland, but also 350 in Holden that he has purchased since 2015. And without the APR program, 61A and things like that, it wouldn't be possible for a first generation farmer. He had started out in Berlin, renting little bits of land, plots in other areas, starting in farmers markets, and being able to move forward and grow his business and actually own a piece of property, to have security in that, and to continue what he wanted to do is just it's a blessing. I know it's a program that is evaluated and adjusted all the time. I know, actually, the commissioner might know more about this, but I know in Hardwick yesterday, there was a very large vote. There was a potential horse racetrack going in there. I'm sure many of you are nodding, so maybe had heard of it. I know it was voted down at the town level, but looking at this situation, moving forward with looking at the exact restrictions, horses are agriculture, but gambling is not. So taking these sorts of things, moving forward, working with the state, our representatives, our senators, and really fine-tuning the APR program to make sure it's doing what it should do and protect the land and make it affordable for those that are farming, and just, keeping everything on the straight and narrow. But I think overall, it's incredibly valuable.
APR Farm was never part of Jordan Dairy Farms until 1990 or so. That thing moves. And in turn, I can almost remember to the day, I believe I was just out of high school, and my father and my uncle, who ran the dairy operation before us, came to the farm and asked, do you boys plan on staying here and working on the farm? And I guess my brother and I weren't smart enough to say no, but we stayed. And in turn, we said yes. And my brother and I both went to agricultural schools with intentions of coming home to run the dairy operation successfully. And at the time, I think it was more help, and I think similar to the Mann family, was to keep the land open and to keep their open space available for us and other younger generations to do it. And I think it did give the farm some money to help with some bills that were already, bought and paid for a couple different times that we had to pay again. So in turn, that helped with that opportunity. But I think where the Jordan farm has benefited more from is we bought some neighboring property in Rutland that was APR, and through the assistance of White Oaks to help increase our property that was farmable for us in town. And then we went to purchase another piece of property on the Rutland-Holden line that we asked for some help from APR. At the time, there wasn't any funding available at the particular time to help with that. And we were fortunate enough that the bank believed in us enough to give us some money for that. And then shortly after that, 12 years ago or so, we had the opportunity to rent another farm that was APR in Spencer, Massachusetts, to help produce more land for us, as we're always looking for open space, that we lose open space to rural development here in central Massachusetts has been very challenging. And it's not necessarily property that we've owned, it's property that other folks have owned in town that have opportunities for their children to live on or sell for real estate. It wasn't too many years ago that the town of Rutland was one of the largest and most rapidly growing communities in the state of Massachusetts. And I can remember the day that the APR lady came to the town of Rutland, and she went over and met with the gentleman that lived across the reservoir from us for some of the most open hayfields, largest parcel in the town of Rutland, and they wanted to purchase that. And the gentleman wanted to preserve it and keep it open, and he was looking for some money. And he was looking for a lot of money. And APR had restrictions, and the maximum you could get was $10,000. And for the simple thing of APR is they do an appraisal of what the property is worth, mainly for residential development or agricultural value. And there's a difference between that typically, and that can't be any greater than $10,000. And that's all they can afford to pay to do something like that. And you, the farmer, typically owns it. And in turn, that wasn't enough for this individual to do it. And now if you look across the reservoir, there's homes there instead of open space, just because APR wasn't able to successfully secure that because of that. So I've seen a lot of APR that has gone over time. I would certainly agree with some of the other speakers there that APR has changed and evolved over time, and we're always trying to make it better for it. I can tell you that I wasn't wise enough back then that the understanding to me was more or less APR will give you some money, please don't build a house here, good luck farming, continue to go. If you wanted to build a new barn on some of this property, you had to ask permission or put a manure pit up or things like that, and APR has been very rewarding to that. And as the dairy industry continues to struggle in Massachusetts, some farmers have tried to have breweries or Tough Mudder runs and things like that, that APR has had to explore and see the options of that going forward to do it, and it's been difficult to do some of that. APR has been very generous to the Jordan farm, and we put up an anaerobic digester here a number of years ago to help power the farm, but also be able to have the ability to sell some of the power back to end users here in Massachusetts. And APR was fortunate enough to bless that and allow us to put up, we actually have 2 anaerobic digesters on our facilities now to physically do that, and that just helps keep cash flow coming in with this process going forward. So APR is good, you just have to work through some of the quirks to get there.
Too late. I came to this thing, so it's too late. Watch myself. I have to say that I knew the gentleman, Lilac Hedge owns that farm, and Jack Sandstrom, he was the first one with the APR in the state of Massachusetts. I helped him milk cows many a times. And APR also has been very fortunate in this town. More ways than you can speak of, for crying out loud, in my book. We've tried very hard to have it in various other farms, and it didn't quite go over. And I hope that someday maybe they can come back and try again, and because I'm very nervous. I feel like talking to you people about preserving the farms and open space in this town more than anything else. I don't want to talk about the old man and everything else, you know. I'm looking for the future. But I'll say one thing, thank God my father had in the contract with HPI about APR, that they had to put the land under APR. And we went to court. Nobody knew this, but we went to court with APR, and the day before we went to that court, they settled and got the APR started on the property. And for my nephew and his family, thank God for that. What Mr. Jordan just talked about, the Watts Farm up there and the development, to this day I am very upset about APR because of that, because that was, in my book, the wildlife corridor. And it was going to be a path all the way from Wachusett Reservoir all the way around, and it hit Pine Hill Reservoir and went all the way out to the prison camp area, the Rutland State Park area. That would have been beautiful. But it is what it is. And I just hope that in the future, especially where agritourism has come on into this town, and thank goodness for that, because it's one of the best things that's ever happened to the farmers, and I hope that we can expand upon it and see what happens in the future. And thank you for that.
I'm trying to pick up from what I hear from the farmers at the table here, and I had no prior knowledge or expectation that they immediately mentioned the APR program. I will admit it is probably the signature program of the Department of Agricultural Resources. I think what you've heard is that, and I want to emphasize, it's not just, I don't know how else to say it, it's not any farm. It's based on soil quality, and there's scientific exploration to determine if it's what's known as prime soil, and there's a definition to what's prime soil or what's called state important soil. So again, we're trying to protect, there's only so much farmland in the world, and we're trying to protect what we can here in Massachusetts. That program has now been replicated in many, many states across the country. So it's an influx of cash to the people, the family that owns the property at the time the restriction goes into effect, and that money may be used for any purpose. It could be reinvested in the farm, it could be used to turn the farm from one generation to the others, retirement for the folks who are passing it on. It can be used for any purpose at all, but it also discounts the value of the property in perpetuity, because it may only be sold as agricultural land, so that is a better opportunity for a new, younger farmer to be able to afford it. you just mentioned agritourism. So I wanted to ask you all about, it's altogether different farming in the you're all multi-generational farmers. I think third generation and more is what I think I heard as we went around the table pretty much. How is your farm adapted to farm in the 21st century? And is there an agritourism component, and what would that be? I'm wondering if folks can talk about that. And also, one of the ways our farmers in Massachusetts survive, because land is very expensive, we've got winter obviously, energy costs are very high, it's difficult to access labor sometimes, so there's a lot of challenges. One of the ways our farmers in Massachusetts have adapted is to sell direct, to sell retail rather than wholesale. To the point that I mentioned, the farmers do almost $500 million a year in sales, over $100 million, over 20% of that is direct sale from a farmer to the end consumer. So as we go around the room, could you talk about agritourism? Could you talk about changes you may have had to make to be able to farm today as opposed to what generations before have done? And we're going to start, Bill, do you have something for this one? And then we'll go the other way around the room.
Okay, so like I said earlier, I'm a first generation farmer. So my Christmas trees and maple syrup have been a big hit here in town. We started very small, and I started putting out posters and stuff to try to spark some interest in Christmas trees. And what I found was the Facebook, and the computers, that's how the word got out. And once that took off, it's amazing. I get phone calls from Boston, and I can't believe that they're looking for me, but they love to come to the farm. They love the idea of the fact that you're growing the tree right there, that they're cutting the tree themselves. We have the sugar house right there so they can see where we make the maple syrup, and we sell that along with the trees, and it's worked out very well for us. So like the weekend after Thanksgiving is a real mob house down at my place, and it's a good thing. So.
Let's put it this way, my part of the farm is, like I said, it's moved over to Randy Jordan to use, and my nephew, and...
Can you please put the mic in front of your mouth? You cannot hear back.
Nah, I don't feel like it today. But anyways, agritourism for me, for crying out loud, because I've been almost 25 years in the planning board, this is one of the biggest things that we have turned over, and it's something I think that will, in the future for Rutland, I don't know where we're going to be going, but I'm hoping that the state will stay with us and have recreation that owns half of the Rutland. But agritourism is something that draws people in, and I want Rutland to be ready for that, because I feel that's one of the best things that can happen, is to spread the word. Because Rutland we're the highest place between the ocean and the Berkshires. Period. We are. And even Princeton's town is lower than us. So I feel that it's always a good drawing card to have, and I want it to continue.
Well, before I pass the mic along, when I introduced myself, I failed to mention that before I had this job as commissioner, I was the town administrator of Princeton. So I do know the area quite well. And there is a little mountain there in Princeton, Wachusett. But we'll settle that after. Can we keep talking about agritourism?
Ag-tourism is certainly the way to be. You can dictate your own prices on different things, and going forward there, social media is a big hit that has helped ag-tourism, and people are curious of what's going on, and you try to educate people there. I think the ag tourism end of things through the anaerobic digester and what we've done there, where we are first in the United States to be licensed to bring food waste into our facility to make energy, has been an unforeseen ag tourism thing. There was a time when that was built, the first one was in Rutland, and when that was built, we were averaging 2 tours a week for probably almost 2 years at the digester. We had people from all over the world, not just the United States, coming to tour us now. And now the process of the ag tourism going on further now is the folks are coming from all over the United States right now to learn about the anaerobic digester because it has traveled across the country. And there are 160 digesters that have been online, ready to go to partner with Vanguard Renewables, our company that is doing that. So I guess that you would call that our ag tourism. We're in the world of wholesale milk at the moment. The Jordan family is trying to get away from wholesale milk, where they tell us how much we get paid for our milk 30 days after it leaves, and it's certainly not enough, I will guarantee you of that. In turn, we'd like to go to either processing our milk, or an ice cream stand, or making milk whiskey, or something outside the box that we do on our own with milk driven there as a whole. So we just took it from the other end of the cow and used the manure and tried to get rid of the stink for you folks and turn that into power at the farm there. We do social media with turkeys, and that's kind of our ag tourism. Always happy to educate the kindergarten kids, and the preschools will come and tour the farm. But our doors are always open at the farm for ag tourism of that way going forward.
Heidi, before you speak, it's been suggested to me that as we speak, we should stand. So, yeah. I have a lot of people looking out for me. Sorry.
It is very. So agritourism is a thing I could go on about for a very long time, so I will keep this brief. It's my area of specialty at Lilac Hedge, and I think honestly what will keep us going. We are very fortunate in Rutland to have the setup that we have, to have stepped into this, Ryan purchasing the property when Rutland had passed the ag tourism bylaw. Is that the right thing? I know there's been some difficulty with it and things trying to get hashed out, but it really has been fantastic. I can say, so we are open there in Rutland year-round. 5 days a week, our farm store is there, even scooping ice cream. But when we are open for the agritourism activities, when we can pour you a beer and you can pick a pumpkin, our gross sales is 97% higher. Like what we will do this week and what we do in October is a completely different ballgame. We sell a similar amount of products, but when people can come and visit the cows on a nice weather day, do the things that they do, we greatly appreciate it, and it really what will keep us there. So on that, like as Randy mentioned, is they're moving perhaps to processing, direct selling, and things like that. I know that in supporting agriculture, there's a higher cost with it. We know at Lilac Hedge that our ground beef costs more than it does when you go to the grocery store. But something to keep in mind with that is when you're supporting either us or any of the farmers that you're purchasing item from, the maple syrup or whatever it might be, is that it comes with the value of preserving the open space. I know when people visit us in Rutland, there's some sticker shock on some of our items, even the price for a beer or a burger, but the additional things that come with it, and enjoying the 50 acres of space that we've preserved there, the 350 acres in Holden, comes with a price tag, especially in Massachusetts, where it is the highest land values in the state, even with the APR program. And with that too, in support specifically of dairy, people don't think twice about an $8 pint of beer when they come and shop with us. But if we had $8 on a gallon of milk, there's no way someone would purchase it. So when you're making these purchases and supporting your local farmers, just kind of think about those things a little bit, because there are definitely products. Randy mentioned like the dairy that are worth those dollars, and I know we see it like at Mason Farm. The Christmas tree is more expensive perhaps than at Home Depot, but it's worth it because it preserved the space here and saves us right in this area. So I know all the farmers in this area appreciate that extra dollar that has everything else that comes with it.
So I'm going to do my Overlook Farm talk for a minute. So we're different because we are nonprofit. We're not selling produce to people, but we depend on people coming to us, attending our programs, and enjoying the space that we are helping to preserve. We are grant funded, donation funded, a little bit of program funded, but everything that we grow, all the produce that we grow is donated for free to people who might not otherwise be able to afford to buy educational, nutritional produce. So we rely on people coming by. It's amazing to be able to sort of co-locate with Lilac Hedge and to build on the folks that are coming there anyway. But we only need people coming by. So we're very different than some of these other farms. We don't have products to sell, but we need people to appreciate the open space and appreciate the produce and the education that we're trying to provide and come by for that. So we're sort of agritourism, but we're nonprofit agritourism, so we're a little different, but we need it.
Kind of following down the line here, as Sac Castle, one thing I'd say about agritourism is having kind of cooperation with Overlook Farm and with Lilac Hedge right next door. When we have an event, we can send people over there. When they have an event, they can send people our way. So we kind of help each other out that way. And especially when we all have something going on, that makes for a pretty big day up on the hill there. And as John said earlier, we do primarily, I'd say 90% of our sales as retail. So we count a lot on people coming out to the Sugar House when we're open. Throughout the season, we'll post online when we're going to be open, and that allows people to come out and actually see our operation. They can see the evaporator going, and we have a lot of kids come out, kids groups, scout troops, and stuff like that. So we get a lot of people in the door that way, and sell direct right out of the Sugar House. That part of the year is part of our biggest sale point. We also have like a little self-serve box there right on the side of the building that we sell out of too. So once people get that relationship established, people come out more often. They buy direct from us. So the agritourism part of that is huge. I think that's what is best for us. To have people directly come out and see what's going on during the season. So. Yeah, sure.
I want to say one more sugaring thing. In terms of sticker shock, we have people occasionally say, well, I can buy this for a lot less at the grocery store. Yeah, I know that. There's a reason for that. Part of it is volume. But I think when they come out and they see, they don't see probably 90% of what goes into making that, but they see some of it. They see what happens, how much work is involved. And I think they appreciate the price a little bit more when they see you loading wood minute after minute into they see you feeding the animals. They see a little bit more of what goes into it, and they understand why it might cost a little bit more, but they also know that all of their money is going to those people doing that. So it definitely makes a difference.
I don't have too much component of the agricultural component. Excuse me, I'm a little nervous. Anyway, we're a family farm, like I said, and we're advertised in the Agricultural Commission brochure, and it's a scenic farm. We're on top of a hill, and we do, like I said, we're advertising that. We do have a solar facility on the farm too, which we're very proud of. It's a 1 megawatt farm, solar farm, and the power produces 125 houses with power in the community and beyond. So we're proud of that. So that's kind of an attraction for us. But we're self-sufficient, basically, raising animals for our own use. We do sell some, turkeys during the holidays and stuff like that, so that brings some people in, and eggs and pork. We custom raise some pork, so that brings people in too for our facility. So that's about all I can say on that.
Okay, if it's all right, I'd like to talk about agricultural education as opposed to tourism, because I think they're both very much connected, but education and communication is more of my expertise, I would say. Like I'd mentioned, I'm going to school for that, and so I am planning on being a high school agricultural teacher, which I can see some of your faces, isn't quite common around here. We do have 4 agricultural high schools in the state where they primarily have ag programs, but there's also some technical schools that also have ag programs as an example for like animal science, vet tech programs. And also in component is the FFA program. I think ag education comes in a lot of forms, especially social media, like my dad had mentioned, and actually a lot of folks have. But I have experience specifically with Lilac Hedge. Both I've been working for them since I was 14 at farmers markets in Boston. I couldn't quite drive in, I was being dropped off. But I have a lot of experience working with the public, and like John had mentioned, working directly with the consumer. I think that's where I see agriculture going, is being direct to consumer. So I look forward to implementing that at our dairy farm, hopefully in the future sometime. But I think direct to consumer is the way that agriculture is headed, because I think folks in Massachusetts, but also across the country, are really interested in looking to see where their food actually comes from. And that's what they're interested in. So if we can provide that for them, I see that being very successful.
So I found, I wasn't sure, Mrs. Campbell asked us to be here, I wasn't sure what the forum was going to be, etc. So I was starting to do a little homework, and I was pulling up these sensors that I found online, and this is, I think, somewhat relevant. It was August 1850, so about 175 years ago, and it was a James Reed who was the owner of Alta Vista Farm, 130 acres. He owned it 175 years ago, same 130 acres today. And on the census, it was more a production in agriculture, and it was talking about 75 acres of improved acres, 50 unimproved acres, and then he was defined as a farmer, and he had 2 horses, 6 working oxen, 1 swine, 3 milch cows, which meant milking cows, 3 other cattle, and his production was 50 bushel of Indian corn and 71 bushel of oats. And they were able to maintain the farm by living with those animals. I know that for myself, when we were younger, throughout the 70s and the 80s, our farm was more a hobby farm. My father had another business, and it was the income from that business that was able to kind of keep Alta Vista Farm running. My father sold the farm in 1986, and the business, Man's Trailer Sales, in 1986. And it was after that that we started doing more as far as turkeys. We would have 300 turkeys a year that we would raise for Thanksgiving. People started coming to the farm, so in a sense it was agritourism at Alta Vista started around the in the 1990s. My mother opened her little store to sell bison meat in 1995. And that's when people would start coming to the farm. So yeah, people they love being able to sit there and to look at the bison, and it attracted a lot of people as far as Native American descent, and things kind of just blossomed, and the next thing she was doing what she would call bison days. I see faces out there of people that helped during bison days, and that was an educational component. My mother would visit a lot of the schools and talk about it as well. So I know that agritourism has to exist in order for the farms today to continue. I think there's so many different opportunities, and it's just looking at agriculture differently, because unfortunately what was done in the 1850s, we just can't sustain the farms nowadays with that.
I just want to say what huge respect I have for you farmers here who are still keeping your farms going and supporting your farms with the tourism. I think it's really important that the ag comes first, and that the tourism is there to support the ag, and I think we can't lose perspective of that. It can't be tourism on a farm just for tourism. It should be there to support an agricultural endeavor, and I really respect all of you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Couple quick comments on agritourism before we move. I did mention to you all that what a larger part of Massachusetts agriculture are direct sales to consumers, over 20% of the annual sales. I think I failed to mention Massachusetts is 5th in the nation, 5th out of the 50 states in doing that. And that's really remarkable. We are not one of the bigger agricultural states in the country. We're well into the 40 in biggest, but that, because what we have here are eaters. We have a lot of consumers in Massachusetts. And as was mentioned, relative to agritourism, pick your own apples and blueberries as opposed to just buying the peck or the bushel or the quart. That's agritourism. It's what gets people to go to the farm to buy the farm's products. Kathy, I think that this might, I mean, you were invited to participate, and I know some of these questions aren't really related to the Grange, but I think it's important because the Grange has been a component related to agriculture for all these years. Could you pass the mic, could we pass this down? Could you talk a little bit about what the Grange does? You're the you're the chair of the State Executive Committee, I think, if I have that right.
Yes, you're correct. I'm just going to stand up because, as Randy knows, I'm getting old, but I wasn't around when the Grange was formed, so my homework assignment today was to tell you a little bit about the origin of the Grange. So I'm just going to come over here, where I can put this down a little bit. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the National Grange and about the Massachusetts State Grange. At the close of the Civil War, Oliver Hudson Kelly, a farmer and a clerk in the post office department, was sent by President Andrew Johnson to survey the damage to the southern agriculture as a result of the war. The destruction was not limited to farms, but to society as a whole. Kelly realized that in order for America to become united again and recover from the war, people had to find common ground. Agriculture was the one thing that all had in common. Kelly set out to build on an idea of a fraternity of farmers that would bring the North and the South together again. Kelly and 6 others were instrumental in setting out to create an organization that would bring people from across the nation together for education and for fellowship. And so, on December 4th, 1867, the National Grange was born in Washington, D.C. The ideals and principles of the 7 founders were accepted by people around the country and resulted in the formation of local, county, and state granges in many states. Now, lest you think that it was solely men who started the Grange, there were 2 women who had pivotal roles in its creation. Mrs. Temperance Lane Kelly, the wife of Kelly, and her niece, Miss Carolyn Hall. They both offered encouragement and motivation when needed. Carolyn Hall was often referred unofficially as the 8th founder due to her influence and continued support. The Grange is a fraternal family community organization with its roots in agriculture. Membership in the Grange starts at age 14. Historically, the Grange was one of the first organizations that gave an equal voice and vote to women and men, long before the women received the right to vote in 1920. In the Grange, a member is allowed to vote and hold office, whether one is 14 or 94, and one is not required to be a farmer in order to become a Grange member. And that there is a junior Grange open for members aged to 14. But the focus of the Grange has always been agriculture and community service. The Grange Declaration of Purposes, which was adopted in 1874, states that the Grange is not a political or party organization. Instead, and I quote, "we seek the greatest good to the greatest number," end quote. Early on, members realized that it was vital for members to vote and promote legislation for agriculture in rural America. It's important to note that all National Grange bylaws and policies begin at the local community level, thus making it a grassroots organization. The local community Granges are the backbone of the organization. Both the National Grange and the State Grange are delegate bodies. meaning they act on resolutions submitted by the lower granges. And you know, there is even a grange in Washington, D.C. called Potomac Grange No. 1. The first victory of the Grange was the passage of the Granger Laws in 1874. Despite several court cases, Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, forcing the railroad companies to publish rates and discontinue charging different rates for short and long hauls. This act also created the Interstate Commerce Commission. President Lincoln created a Department of Agriculture in 1862, but the department's influence was narrow, and Congress didn't feel that a cabinet-level position was justified. However, the National Grange persevered, and ultimately President Cleveland raised the position of Agriculture, Secretary of Agriculture, to a cabinet position in 1889. I'm going to give you one example of how this Grange Roots process works. I think you've all heard about rural free delivery. The idea for that started at a local Grange meeting. People in urban areas had mail delivered to their doors. Why should farmers and others living in rural areas have to go to the post office to pick up the mail? A resolution was written at the local level, made its way to the county Grange, the state Grange, and finally to the National Grange. The National Grange legislative representative began pressing Congress to start such a program. Congress finally approved a sum of money for an experiment in several rural areas in West Virginia. The experiment was successful, and many benefits were realized for rural areas and was also profitable to the post office. Through the years, the National Grange has supported the creation of farm credit, direct election of senators, rural electrification, extension services at land-grant colleges, the state police system, and a number of others. In 1919, a permanent Grange office was established in Washington, D.C., with a legislative representative working toward the passage of legislation to benefit agriculture. In later years, the federal government wanted that location. And in 1943, the National Grange subsequently purchased a property located on Jackson Place, adjacent to Lafayette Square, less than a block from the White House. An 8-story building was constructed and is the headquarters for the National Grange. The president and legislative department, along with support staff, are located in that building. And of course, community service is equally important to the Grange, and their Granges are encouraged to become active in their respective communities and to offer assistance whenever needed. Examples of Grange community service are programs in Massachusetts such as identity theft scam programs, deaf awareness programs, organizing volunteering at food pantries, donations of items and gift cards to the Department of Families and Children, rabies clinics, COVID vaccine clinics, mosquito control, backyard gardens, raising chickens, retiring old flags, and honoring educators, police, emergency responders, and thousands of volunteer hours to other programs and organizations. In October 2013, the Massachusetts State Grange launched the Grange Roots program as a way of reaffirming our agricultural roots. Granges are encouraged to promote agricultural education in their communities by sponsoring programs or getting involved in activities that educate their communities in the importance of agriculture. But I will tell you some other things that we've done. The State Grange also financially partners with several organizations as a means of educating students, and I know this is right up Sarah's alley, about agriculture from kindergarten to high school, because we've all heard stories that the young folks don't know where their food comes from. They think it comes from the grocery store. So as I said, we partner with agriculture in the classroom, which educates students about agriculture from kindergarten to high school. The Massachusetts Envirothon is a high school program that emphasizes the importance of natural resources with a different theme or current issue each year. And a team approach is used to solve problems along with community involvement. And last year's Current issue was achieving a zero waste future for Massachusetts. This is an annual competition, and last year Lexington High School won the competition and went on to win the national competition. The Springfield Technical Community College Sustainathon is a high school program educating students about sustainability and climate change challenges, such as reducing our carbon footprint, sustainable soils and water resources, recycling, biodiversity, food security, green buildings, and many other issues. The UMass Amherst Undergraduate Summer Scholars Program provides students the opportunity to conduct research affecting such things as cranberry bogs, vineyard viruses, orchard pests, watershed protection, nutrition, salt marshes, wildlife surveys, protection of pollinators, and many others. UMass Amherst is also the site of a Grange-sponsored pollinator garden. The state apiary is located next to that garden, and the Massachusetts Beekeepers Association holds its annual meeting at the same location. We also financially partner with the state, FFA, and 4-H organizations, and our Grangers are encouraged to connect with them as a way of supporting these clubs. And we really support these things that educate our youth because we think it is so important. This year we're celebrating 150th anniversary of the Massachusetts State Grange, and we know that we are going to continue to make a difference in the lives of folks, and we think that we are going to be able to let me just tell you one little thing. We sent out a survey. We've hired a consultant to help us. We sent out a survey to all of our members. And we asked them what was important to them, programs and so forth. The 2 programs that were important to them, high on the list, was agriculture and community service, thus confirming the original mission of the Grange in that area. Thank you for your attention, and if you can have any questions, you can see me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we heard that certainly the Grange has a strong relationship with agriculture, but also, and this whole Smithsonian event is about rural America, so the connection there, what we just heard, very, very strong. I have another question for the group. Climate change, it's something that we hear a great deal about. It's something that I think our farmers are aware of. We see much later frosts in the fall. We see, well, that's, I mean, certainly the falls are getting longer and warmer. I used to expect a hard frost usually the last week of September, the first week of October, 20 or so years ago. And now it's well into November or even early. I haven't mulched over my garlic yet because the ground hasn't frozen up hard enough yet. So, climate change. How is it affecting you? And what are you doing about it? And what are you doing about it for the good of your own farm? And what might you be doing about it for the good of all of us? Because truthfully, farms offer the opportunity for some mitigation of the issues related to climate change. So some might say, and that's fine, that you haven't really tackled it yet, but I know certainly Sap Castle, I know the maple industry is thinking about it because we need certain weather conditions in order to get the sap flow. So I think that's a very, a topic that's on everyone's mind. So, Bill?
Okay, so with climate change and maple syrup, obviously...
Hold it a little closer,
I'm sorry.
No, I want them to hear you back there.
All right. Everybody can hear me? Good. Okay, so with the maple syrup, back when we started doing that, making maple syrup, we would be tapping in February. President's Day weekend is when we would always tap. And this last week, it was running very well. We were not prepared at our place, but Sap Castle was. You tapped, kind of.
Yeah, most of it. I wouldn't say prepared, but yeah, we did it.
Well, we missed that one. But the January thaws have been a week long lately, huh?
Yeah.
And they used to be a couple days and that was it. So if you can jump on that January thaw now, so we've all kind of changed and started earlier. And the season wraps up by the middle of March now. End of March if you're lucky. It used to go into April. So there is a big change there. So you're going to touch more on maple syrup, I'm sure, than I am, but I'll just go on to Christmas trees. So Christmas trees, we're planting them earlier than ever now because things are thawing out quicker. And that's a good thing, I guess. You have kind of a longer spring, I guess, more time to get those trees in. But the thing of it is you need to get them in early because come May, it's getting hot and drying out. This last summer was extremely dry. We were hand watering some of our transplants just to try to keep them alive, which was successful, thank God. But, so there is a lot of change there. And big fluctuations too. Not this last summer, but the summer before, it seemed to rain every single day. And that beat us up with thinning out our fertilizers for the Christmas trees. And, that had its own challenges and also brings out a lot of diseases in the ground that wouldn't be there if it's nice and dry, or drier. So there's a lot of combat with the climate change.
That's it on down.
Oh, right. Okay, very good.
So climate change is one of those buzzwords that everybody talks about. A lot of us don't know a lot about it, but we're learning about it. One of the big things that the digester has had over time is they talk about carbon footprint. And the digester mainly was built on carbon footprint. We're a zero carbon footprint at Jordan Farm. And we're also selling some of our carbon credits back to other companies that have a carbon deficit to do it. So in turn, we know a little bit about it at the farm. They blame all this global warming on the cows, methane, burping and farting. So I guess we're trying to do something about it that way of things. I think you see more about this fluctuation in weather temperatures. It's not healthy for us as humans, but it's not healthy for animals either, of being able to try to keep the animals content at the temperatures they are to help keep them healthier and going forward with that. Our soil temperatures is what we try to plant our corn on an annual basis, and that hasn't fluctuated an awful lot over time. It's more moisture in the ground, and we're trying to do more preservation or less disturbing of the soil with no-till crop and less mud per se, and sometimes we go to a drought in other cases there, but with the amount of manure that we have at the farm, that helps with some of the drought cases better off than other people. So there's a lot of buzzwords going on there, and carbon and global warming, and I think we as humans have a tough time dealing with a 20-degree day and then a 70-degree day. It's enjoyable but not favorable to us, all of us.
So I don't have much to add to what they already have said, other than I truly believe that although farmers sometimes are blamed for the crisis that we have, cows kind of being he said with the buzzwords, but I really think that the open space that's being preserved is what is actually going to make the difference in the long term. If you look at the actual greenhouse gas emissions, things like that, agriculture is, I want to say, less than 4% in the USA. It's transportation and things like that, rural development and things that we need to really keep an eye on in terms of that. I think that really the folks that are stewards of the land, that are passing the land down to their generations, are the ones that are going to take the greatest care of it and making sure that there's much to come. I know as a consumer myself, in addition to being involved directly in agriculture, when it's warmer in the winter, it's a lot easier to deal with than the feet of snow and the frigid temperatures. But even things that are related to agriculture, but not as much, things like the ticks that we have, things that are directly related to not having those hard freezes and the things that are really important to us. It's certainly something that we need to learn how to work with. I know that pest pressures are an incredible part of the agricultural industry, whether it be something like Christmas trees that was mentioned, whether it's, I think it's a lot more common in fruit and vegetable, that people are thinking about it, but we deal with it with the livestock as well. When there's a good hard freeze over the winter, it really benefits us. in terms of animal care and things like that. So it's certainly something we're keeping an eye on, that we're kind of ebbing and flowing with, but is very concerning to each of us as well.
So from a produce perspective, I feel like Overlook is somewhat unique here in that we're growing fruits and vegetables. Obviously, dramatic weather shifts are very challenging. Serious droughts are very challenging. We're having to bring water in for watering pest problems that are exacerbated by very dramatic shifts. Serious weather events that are just much more dramatic than they used to be. It makes things a lot harder for us to grow. Another sort of aspect of it that you might not think about is that people's costs go up for heating, for cooling. The amount of money that you're spending on your life to sort of be warm, be cold as necessary means that you have less money to spend on other things. Obviously, we grow everything for donations, so that is just one aspect of increased need. If you're either going to freeze or you're going to be hungry, you're going to choose to spend that money on warming your house if you can. It means that there's less available money to do things like buying healthy food. So that is one aspect that we're seeing from sort of the donation perspective. People have less money because they're spending it on other things that they have to do to keep themselves safe and healthy, because the weather is just a lot less predictable than it used to be. I'll say other Maple things after you.
Sure. So I feel that I spend a lot of time staring at my weather app on my phone this time of year, watching the future temperatures for the coming week, and like Billy mentioned, this January thaw that came really early got us thinking that we should probably tap. So we tapped December 28th, which is just unheard of. And talking to my uncle, when they were making maple syrup on the farm, they would wait till February vacation, mostly because they had a lot of help then too, but that's when things were happening. That's when the sap was flowing. But that's the earliest we've ever tapped. The earliest we had done before that, I think, was January 17th. That was in maybe 2019. So that it's kind of a scary wake-up call for us, but we, like they say, you got to make hay while the sun shines. So we had to take advantage of it if we want to kind of make the same amount of syrup we've been making every year. We've got to take advantage of these these warm spells. And I'm nervous to tap that early, and thinking of how cold it would get after that. And that was not our problem this year. It warmed up and the sap ran well. I think we gathered maybe 850 gallons or so, and then it was too warm. The sap shut off. The temperatures didn't get below freezing at night, which is what you need for that sap to keep moving in the tree. And it didn't for well over a week. So we're kind of looking at, did we screw up here? Did we tap too early? But you never know. It's just such a gamble now. So the weather's kind of come down. The temps have come down now, so the sap's running again decently now. But I'm looking again at my phone too much and seeing that in another week the temps are going to be coming up again, and I'm looking at those nighttime lows and seeing that it might not get cold enough again that week, so it might shut off again. So there's just it's a lot of looking and seeing what's going on with the weather. I think to mention one other thing, like Heidi was saying, we all look at what we do as farmers as well. And while I'm in the sugar house loading in 6 cords of wood into an evaporator throughout the season, looking at the black smoke out the chimney, thinking we're kind of adding to this too. I think of ways that we can kind of help with that as well. One of the ways that we have is to take advantage of grant programs. We got a grant through USDA for energy efficiency, in which we MDAR, I thought it was USDA, MDAR, in which we were able to get a full reimbursement grant for some equipment that reduces the amount of fuel that we use. Essentially, it's called a steam away, and what it does, it makes the evaporator a lot more efficient. So we're burning less wood to make the same amount of syrup. So that's just one way that we think we can try to help the problem as we're facing it. So.
I'm like my double duty. I also want to say that we all of our electricity is produced by solar panels that we have, and as stewards of significant amount of woodland, we're always in the process of sort of thinking about what our forest management plan is, and a big part of that for us is about carbon sequestration and about making sure that we keep that space not just open, but also in trees and in sort of perpetual tree production, large trees as well as younger trees, so that we are sort of doing as much as we can to keep those woodlands healthy, to do as much as they can to help us.
Climate change has affected my farm, probably I have to say raising hay. It's either feast or famine with the rain. 2021, I think we had excessive rainfall, and that made it hard to get the equipment on the fields, running up the fields, and then bringing in dry hay. We shared some of our hay with Schultz Farm down the street from us. So that was a challenge. And this year was just the opposite. It was feast or famine. Like I said, we didn't have adequate, it was more or less a drought this year, so we didn't get a second cutting of hay this year, so that affected our hay production. But that's the life of a farmer. Some days you have an excess of hay, and other times hardly any hay. So this year was a little less hay that we wanted, but we'll get through it.
So as we've already made clear, we don't live on the farm anymore, but these practices that you're hearing these farmers talk about that help with carbon sequestration and any kind of regenerative farming practices are so important to support. So I'm just going to say support these farmers that are practicing these farming methods that are going to be beneficial for everybody on the planet. And as individuals in your yards, consider not having big lawns. There's a movement now to turn your lawns into meadows. Find out which plants are your native plants that support the native pollinators because they evolve together. Get solar panels if you can, drive electric cars, So it's not just the farmers who have to do things, it's all of us as a community. But as a community, supporting farmers who are practicing these farming methods is super important.
Okay. Just a few other items relative to climate. As was mentioned, both USDA and the state, we have a lot of programs to encourage farmers to use less energy. In some cases, we've been able to provide means by which farmers can completely get off the grid, and they're making all their energy from solar, and obviously that's a great thing. I'm just going to mention several things that I don't think have been said. What have we seen? We've seen insects that formerly wouldn't overwinter here, damaging insects that now can, because it just doesn't get as cold for as long. How cold it is for how long it is affects all our orchard crops, our berry crops. The people at UMass will be able to tell us apples need, and different varieties need so many hours of a cold below a certain temperature over the course of the winter as part of their life cycle. So that's something, people are starting to think about what varieties of fruit they may grow that may do well. At the same time, sometimes this warmer weather allows crops that might not have been able to grow here. When I was in the nursery business, we would all of a sudden, there were plants that we knew could grow on, say, Long Island or Maryland and Delaware, but couldn't survive the winters here. Now all of a sudden they can. That's the facts. We can't, we have to acknowledge what we see. And though there's several have mentioned, some people are blaming farms for causing problems with carbon and climate change. On the other hand, farms have a great opportunity to to mitigate, to assist. Several have mentioned carbon sequestration. Let's make sure we all know what that is. If we can all remember a long time ago in science class and biology class, plants take in carbon dioxide, water, and with chlorophyll they photosynthesize. That's how they make their energy. But a lot of that carbon is stored in the tissue or in the roots of the plants. So forest land, to have trees every year sucking carbon out of the sky and pulling it into their system and using some of it, that's perfect. We've also now seen farmers traditionally, either in the fall or in the spring, would cultivate their land. Well, that would actually release the carbon that had been stored up by the roots of those plants, whether it's a tree or corn. So we're seeing now a lot of dairy farmers and other farmers are doing what's known as no-till farming. So this is, the corn gets chopped, but instead of in the spring completely turning the ground over and letting that carbon go back into the atmosphere, now that duff, if you want to call it, that layer of dead plant material, farmers can drill into that, plant the seed, and that dead plant material actually acts as a mulch to help that new plant grow. And this way we can continue to keep carbon in the soil, to the point there's discussion, and I honestly think it'll happen someday, that farmers are going to be paid for that. They're going to be paid for taking carbon out of the atmosphere. Carrie, I don't know where you are. Okay, so you asked me to go about an hour. We've gone over an hour. Do you think this might be a time that either we slowly move towards wrapping it up or see if we have any questions?
I think we should ask for questions, if people have questions, but we do have some coffee and refreshments downstairs too, where the conversations can continue, if that's okay?
Now you're talking.
So it's all up to you folks how you want to do this.
So, and you won't hurt our feelings, we'll just think we did a terrific job. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
What is happening with the Hume Farm on the main street?
May I just repeat the question for everyone? So the question was, what's happening at the Hume Farm on Main Street? Was that right? Can anyone answer?
I'm a Hume, but there's no farm there. My parents used to grow corn, and they had a little stand that they would sell corn every summer. So they're gone, and so is the corn.
Was that land in an agricultural thing? Because I see now a couple of acres are for sale, but the rest of it is still...
So evidently it wasn't preserved, but someone was raising corn there.
There was no land with the stand where the corn grew. It was grown over on Prospect Street, where my brother had a few acres, and that's where they would grow the corn.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
You haven't mentioned really too much about forest management. I mean, there are plenty of people who aren't farmers who have land that can go into 61, 61A, 61B, and you can save some money and also help to keep the carbon problem down. And in the future, perhaps, whether you're a farmer or just a landowner, you'll be able to sell or trade some of that to offset people who are polluting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, emphasis on a little. The question was about forest management, and truthfully, though the Department of Agricultural Resources promotes the sale of forest products, of lumber, etc., we're not the agency that deals with the management. That's our sister agency, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. But they have multiple programs that you can, I'm trying to remember from my Princeton days, put together a forest, you put together a forest management plan, and it's a long-term plan on how that parcel will be managed, how that parcel will have trees taken out, how perhaps less productive trees will be taken out to assist or to make it easier for the better trees to grow. It's certainly a program that's very important. I mean, we're one of the most densely populated states in the country. It's a little bit gratifying that you know that, but you still drive in Massachusetts and we're quite forested. So I didn't give you a great answer because we're not actively into this management programs that DCR has, but they manage all the state forests in the state, and they're also looking to work with individual private landowners. I'm afraid that's about all I can say about that. Sure, please, stand up.
Okay, yeah, so we think about this a lot. We've been thinking about this because we have lots of woods. And I would just like to make a plug for anybody who has woodland to look into Chapter 61, one, for tax reasons, but two, having a forest management plan is amazing. There are all kinds of different grant programs that you can get to protect wildlife, to do carbon sequestration programs, to do all kinds of different things with your property that are good for many different ways. Having a forest management plan, there are cost-sharing options that you can look into through DCR, the Department of Conservation and Recreation. So I would encourage anyone who has woodland, who is not currently sort of doing anything with it, to start at the DCR website and to think about Chapter 61. It's amazing for financial reasons, at least for us, but it's also amazing for sort of caring for the planet reasons, the animals, the water, the air. So it's a great program, even though I know it's not agriculture, but trees are an agricultural product too.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're done here. And we're going to, hopefully many of us will go downstairs for some refreshments, and I think there's, I haven't been down there yet, but I understand there's some displays down there as well. So we appreciate you coming out to hear about farming in Rutland. You're very lucky to have such an active agricultural industry still going on. I will make a plug. You've got 3 great legislators representing you. Jim McGovern is nationally recognized for his work about food, and he leads a tour, a couple-day tour every summer that I generally join him on, paying attention to local agriculture, and certainly Senator Goby and Rep. Ferguson I deal with a lot in my work, and always paying attention both to the communities they represent, but most particularly for my interest for agriculture. So again, thanks so much. I'll hope to speak with some of you downstairs, and again, have a great day. Thank you.